Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Palme d'Or winner. And today we are going back not too far into the past. We are staying within the realm of the 2020s. We're, of course, talking about the 2021 winner, Titane by Julie Ducournau, a French film, a body horror film coming out of a long tradition of things that make me scream and shout while I'm watching.
Yippee!
Whoa!
This was quite the movie to watch. I really should have recorded just a track of the noises I was making because it could have turned it into an ambient album really easily.
Ooh.
But I
I would have paid
digress.
good money for that.
I am excited to talk about what
Patreon content, anyone?
Patreon? Timo squealing while watching Titane.
It'd be like our Home Sweet Home Alone reaction.
Yeah.
It will. Yeah, it's a solo commentary where very few actual words are spoken.
Yes. But a lot of emotion imparted. I'm revealing my hand a little bit, but not in what I think of the movie, just my reaction. I want to get to it. I want to hear what you guys thought, what kind of noises you made while you watched it. But first, we got to do the normal housekeeping duties, because last time we got back into this Palme d'Or mess with Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 epic Vietnam War movie, Apocalypse Now. Three of us thought it was pretty good, and Tucker disagreed, and so it got an 8.8 out of 10, putting it at spot number 8. I recommend you go watch that video to get your fill of Apocalypse Now content, as if nobody else has talked about it on the internet. But
Might I add, killer thumbnail. When I saw that one pop across my YouTube today, I was like, God damn, that's a sharp thumbnail.
Thank you.
Tucker really killing it with that one. Now, I will hand it off to Abram, who has a comment for us to digest and think about. A little raw joke for you Ducournau heads here.
I have two very, very, very short comments here from Treasure. It almost feels like the fifth and sixth member of this program, John Tour, living in the Cat Indeed.
There we
Very
go.
quickly going to close the loop on something that the Cat Indeed said last time, talking about two different actresses playing some sort of beleaguered sex worker.
Yes.
The answer to this riddle that the Cat Indeed put forth is Mikey Madison from Anora and Emma Stone from Poor Things. If this makes no sense to you, go give us some more views. Go check out our Apocalypse Now review.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
How many seconds do a video have to watch for it to count as a view, though?
No, like very
I
few.
know we waffle a lot at the beginning, so.
Like less than 2, I think.
Oh, okay.
I personally count
very
one
few.
view. I personally count one view as like 4 views, like Netflix does, because I assume that the family watches.
sure.
Yeah. I assume they're putting it up on like an
actual-
IMAX screen, and they've got a whole bunch of people watching
It's
it.
probably where
Each
the
actual screenplay is equivalent. I think Netflix does 1.25 people.
and each person has 2 eyeballs, so we should really be counting those
Whoa.
as
It's
individual.
twice the view.
Yeah,
So
honestly.
true.
And then John Tor said here for a good succinct comment here. Great analysis, guys. Always love when a comment starts with some praise of us. So thank you, John Tor. I used to love this movie, but every time I rewatch it, it just gets more disturbing. I think I'm getting too old for this stuff. ...
Mm.
Now, John
watch
Tor, how do you
Titane.
how do you feel about Titane? Let's find out.
Well, Abram, you said it right. Let's find out, Tanner. What happens in this movie? Plot synopsis of this here French film. What are they cooking over there?
Sure, over in the
What's
land
in the
of
water,
France,
Tanner?
we are following a woman named Alexia. Alexia, at a young age, was in a car accident and thus had a metal plate placed into her head. And we fast forward a little bit to see her as an adult woman. She is working in some sort of like car showroom as a exotic dancer. She also, has generally a good time murdering people. We are led to believe through TV reportage that she is somewhat of a serial killer. But things get out of hand with her serial killing. She has to go on the run. And on the run, she decides to escape to escape the French police. She decides to, thank you. Decides to assume the identity of a child who has been missing for decades at this point. A child who would now be roughly her age. But this child is a boy, and she takes on the moniker of Adrian. It is worth noting that all the while she is pregnant, but not with any regular baby. She was, in fact,
This ain't your grandma's baby.
No,
That'd be
this
your
was
mom.
or your dad.
I was talking about your maternal grandmother, Tanner. Just want to make clear.
I should have known. Anyway, you know Titane. She gets fucked by a car. She has sex with a car, and then she has to like pretend to be a guy while she's pregnant, and she has to hide the fact that she is in fact a woman from these firefighters that she is now living with. And it's pretty freaky and weird throughout the entire thing. So I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Abram, you get to be my choice to start because I know you to be a little bit squeamish like myself.
True.
What did you make of this movie? What are your initial
Timo
thoughts?
wants squeamish representation here on the show.
This shit freaked me out.
Yeah, there were parts that had me squeaming and squirming for sure. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm that convinced by Titane. I think it's
Okay.
I think it's sort of captivating just insofar as that it's wholly unpredictable, and so the experience of watching it is quite entertaining at minimum, and I think that there's some really moving sequences of filmmaking here. But as I sort of left the film last night, I didn't really have much of a handle on how I felt about it, and I ended up reading a couple different reviews here. One from our good friend Steven, his Letterboxd review, and another from a really interesting writer for publicseminar.org. Her name is Melinda Freudenberger. And then also an article from Mubi here from Leonardo Goy that I might or might not cite at some point. Only God knows what I'm going to do in the next hour and a half.
True.
But
True.
I sort of like read a like a spectrum of extremely negative to extremely positive feelings on Titane, and my feeling is that I kind of agree with none of them.
Whoa. He
I
chose
kind-
the secret extra option.
Yeah, I just think that there is so much going on here, and there's so many different disparate ideas and tropes that are being played into and called upon, that the result for me is just sort of like a muddle. I don't really know what to make of it. I'm not super convinced by what it's saying. I think it's fun to watch, but it's not really stuck with me.
Tucker, you're up next.
Yeah, I think Titane is good in one particular area, which is the relationship between our two central characters, who I think on their own are decently interesting, but the way in which they interact, I find to be really compelling. And watching their dynamic evolve over the course of the film is what keeps me engaged in that second 2/3. Because what's the father character's name again?
Vincent.
Vincent, yeah. Vincent isn't in the first third, but once he becomes introduced and we get sort of what is the core of this story, I'm a lot more interested by the way that they impact one another and what they know about one another and how their relationship affects one another. But otherwise, I don't know what this movie is saying. I don't really understand the thematics of this movie. I remember seeing it when it came out, and I remember liking it, but I've not really thought about it since it came out. And so rewatching it, I was like, oh yeah, that is what happened in this movie. But I'm a lot more mixed in this movie the second time around, primarily because I find Alexia, the protagonist, to be conceptually interesting, but ultimately I find her kind of shallow. Like, I'm like, she's kind of just a bad person. And I don't really I don't really like watching her because she doesn't really do too much. She goes from being a killer to being quiet. And so on a characterization side, I think I was a little bit underwhelmed by her as the protagonist. And then there's the body horror stuff that is really well done and is certainly very bold. And so I appreciate the movie quite a bit on a creative level. Like, holy shit, not only did this get made, but it got awards of all kinds, which is crazy. But as a viewing experience, it's a movie that I don't really like remember any particular sequences of super strongly. Like it's solid and it's unique, but I feel very mixed on like its actual elements of like mostly writing.
Sure.
Sure. Tanner, your thoughts?
Yeah, so Tucker and I actually saw this together many years ago when it released in theaters in the U.S. And again, like him, like I said, I also remember liking it quite a bit. And then going back to it, it's something where I was just like, I was feeling it out at the same time, this rewatch around, and I was like, yeah, I guess I remember this being, as many people do, as it is remembered culturally now, the movie where a lady fucks a car.
Yeah.
But those elements maybe even pale in comparison to more broadly what the film is doing with
Yeah.
its ideations about gender and human connection and so on and so forth, and aging and all of these things. I found that to be really the overriding thing I got out of it this time around, not necessarily like waiting for the half car half human baby to pop up at the end. I was taken by some actually quite beautiful sequences in this film that I had, largely forgotten. Because even like Tucker had messaged in the in our group chat earlier today that like you have forgotten about the grisly murders that happen in this movie. I was like, yeah, I remember that. I remember like the rampage she kind of goes on in the house. I remember that pretty well. But some of the quieter or more resonant moments of the film kind of pale in comparison to the louder, brasher, more gross out stuff that happens. So I'm excited to talk about those while they're fresh in my mind
Yeah.
at least.
I found this watch. I watched it also when it came out in 2021 in that fall. To like really hit me with the idea that it stuck in my mind because it's so shocking. It's such a shocking movie,
Yeah.
both in its what its kind of a plot is, with this killing rampage, pregnant with the car baby, and then going and living at the fire station as with an assumed identity. Um, that is just kind of out there plot wise. I don't think it's like some what we're used to really dealing with, but there are elements of it that I this time around I kind of gravitate towards. I think that the kind of father son dynamic of the father reintegrating this kid back into his life that is kind of clearly not, and nobody really accepts Alexis as the son, and yet Vincent does. And so I think that this is a unique kind of inversion of what this film is trying to be at the end that makes it worthwhile. But the kind of body horror stuff and all that doesn't do a lot for me in terms of like what we're getting at with these themes of the
Yeah.
movie. I think we uh break free of some male gaze stuff. We allow our character to express this kind of like female rage against misogyny, and that comes out through violent, brutal acts. But like beyond that, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's gross. It's really kind of difficult for me to watch. I'm like, the rampage in the house is like really, really. I mean, it's like a oneer, isn't it? It just goes on and on and on, and
Basically.
it's cool, but we're not really getting into much of what I think there is to discuss about the film until the last third of it. And I like it, but I think my opinion of the film lessened. I think I got a lot more out of it on the first time around, and this time I see
Yeah.
a much more simplistic film.
I absolutely agree, and I think the thing that you mentioned the A plot of this movie, which as you said is Alexia moving in with the firefighters and assuming a new identity. But the thing that the movie starts on and that the movie is remembered for is the body horror, is the gore and the murders and the action sequences and stuff.
This spike that she has in her hair, wonderful characterization. I mean, talk about beautiful collaboration between screenwriting, costuming, props, and special effects. Like you create such a simple tool that defines who our character is, really. Like Alexia, I think, is really defined by this metal spike. Both the implant in her head, which I think is the key piece that ties the whole fucked up bow together. But that spike, of which we get so many brutal murders, is really it's just like an excellent synergistic piece of filmmaking to allow like, oh, we can kill and she'll wipe it off with a Kleenex and then put it back in her hair and then it's ready to be used again 20 minutes from now.
Yeah.
But the point that I was making about that really being what the movie is remembered for is the gore, the body horror, the fucking the car, and the car pregnancy, and all this stuff. That is really, in reality to the film, surprisingly backgrounded for the majority of the runtime of it. And so what I find interesting about watching this movie on a second watch is I found it, as Abram was saying, unpredictable and visceral that first time around. But the second time around, I was quite surprised by how little it focused on those elements in terms of the actual length of the screen time of the movie and also the screenplay in terms of character interactions and stuff. It's really mostly front-loaded in terms of her being a murderer is really only on screen relevant to that first 20 or so minutes of the movie. And so what that means for me is that I feel like the movie's kind of at odds with itself in certain ways, in that it's not fully a body horror gore movie. There's this big chunk in the middle where, you know, the pregnancy is growing, but the body horror elements of the pregnancy have yet to come to fruition, and the serial killer aspect is very, very backgrounded. But then there also that means that it's not fully that, but it's also not fully a family dynamic movie in that way, because also the only thing you think about when you think about this movie in retrospect is like the gore and the fucking the car and all of that. And I'm like, so which idea is this movie really going for? Is it the more audacious thing that people really remember from this movie, or is it what the movie screen time wise mostly goes towards, which is this interpersonal character dynamic that I think is interesting, but I do feel like neither one in my time watching this movie and from what I remember really supports one another, though I bet there's more close reads in terms of the creation behind the movie that would answer some of those questions I have. But on the second time watching it, I'm like, these kind of feel like they're imbalancing one another.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from with that, and you know, there are certainly criticisms that can be levied at this movie surrounding it feeling like two movies or whatever you want to say. To me, it is just by nature of having our character basically have to assume two lives, or trying to assume two lives. Is kind of the avenue there. Two lives, two different identities, very different ones, two different very different families and in settings that she has to exist in. One of them existing as a woman who is being leered at, lusted after, and pursued in romantic fashions that she is not okay with, and then one where she is basically surrounded again, surrounded entirely by men, but she is viewed as a man at the same time. Or at least Vincent is telling everyone that she is, you know, she is his son. She will be viewed as a member of this firefighter EMT group. And so her experience changes vastly. And there are, of course, moments where this experience, you know, her experiences as a woman come through. You know, the scene on the bus, the scene where she dances on top of the fire truck as a couple key ones, but. Yeah, that is sort of it to me, is that the body horror and everything like that is a good selling point for the movie, marketing-wise, if you're trying to, you know, get your cinephile friends excited for this thing as a neon release. You're like, hey, this movie's got some crazy-ass body horror in it. But then I think Ducournau is also implementing those ideas and, you know, not looking to make The Substance like. She is looking to do something different.
Yeah, that movie wasn't out, so.
Yeah, exactly.
I think also just like as a timekeeping point almost. I mean, we're in this like slasher mode for about the first 50 minutes of the film. So
Yeah.
it is still a substantial portion. I'm sort of two minds as I am about I kind of feel most elements of the film, but this sort of idea of these very disparate styles being sutured together. I think that by and large for me it works in the sense that there is such a transgressive nature to the visuals and scenarios of the first 50 minutes that context sort of is imprinted onto my mind for the next hour, right? So because of the well, I mean, it's obviously playing on ideas of French extremity, right? So
Yes.
the tenets of that style of filmmaking, you know, they're audacious and they are graphic, and that's not going to leave you. And so when we're in this secondary mode for the film where we are following Alexia as Adrian, I always have in the back of my mind, at any moment, this person might kill, this person might be exposed, and I know that those stakes are there, and I think that that's an effective tool. I think ultimately my issue is that it's something that Stephen raised essentially in his review, and I was able to find a source from Ducournau speaking about through this piece here from Public Seminar, which is this notion of not visually transgressive filmmaking so much as just like socially transgressive ideas about gender that I think are odd. Ducournau was interviewed here by NBC News, and I'm just going to read a short portion here from Elena Patton because I think it's very interesting. This read Ducournau puts forth here by saying, "Film's presentation of gender is not part." This is the article here. "The film's presentation of gender is not part of an agenda, but rather born out of realizations that she, Ducournau, had a long time ago about her own identity. She said, quote, that my gender was something that is purely a social construct and that has somehow limited me as an individual," she said. Alexia is an extreme embodiment of that philosophy, having, quote unquote, no attachment to any gender, as Ducournau described her. Quote, while trying to question and debunk and subvert the gender stereotypes, I tried to also portray a world where there are more options and we actually do not need to evolve in two genders, which is incredibly limiting, Ducournau said. Having a character that evolves beyond gender was absolutely normal.
Sure.
And I think that's interesting. I just don't think it works that well.
I don't know if I really see that in the movie, though. I mean, the element of Alexia hiding her gender or just trying to change her identity to escape the law, ostensibly, is an interesting narrative point. But I don't know if until outside of. Well, I really think it's only that scene where Alexia dances on top of the fire truck, and then we see everyone sort of looking at her and like sort of questioning, like, why is, to most people, this young man dancing in the way of an exotic dancer. That I think sort of does blur the lines a little bit of like of the way that people perceive gender and different actions in terms of relating to gender. But for a lot of the movie, though, it is mostly Alexia being sort of like fighting against being put in this box. But I don't really know if I feel like Alexia really achieves or thinks about, because she doesn't talk very much about the way that she feels about her gender, or because the character's so quiet and so internalized for that second 2/3 of the movie. I don't really know if I feel like Alexia / Adrian ends up becoming a character that I see as interestingly gender fluid in some way, more that Alexia is a female character, a pregnant female character who's hiding that.
Allow me to explain my thoughts with a joke. It's not gender fluid, but it's rather gender solid, because the metal implant in her brain, literally in her head, I think this inclusion of the reason why she has the titanium, the Titane metal in there at the beginning, is this relationship with her father. I think because the film ultimately wants us to compare and contrast the Given family with the found family. And so the Given family has not a lot of love. There hasn't been a lot of love. Alexia has been a strange child since forever, probably. And but I think that combining this idea of a third way of gender with the transhumanist, like machine human idea, these blend together quite well. How you have not an attraction to other humans, or specifically to other men, but an attraction to machines, an attraction to metal and moving parts.
Things that are inhuman is kind of the,
Yeah. And so, we kind of see that with some of the more explicit, like, sex that is shown in the film. Alexia is attracted to, like, the nipple piercings, and we have, some great body horrors with that. But I think it's indicating with her character a more fascination with non-human sexual activity. And so that can I think that opens us a realm to be in, like, a non-gendered space, because we're not dealing with human. We're not actually dealing with, like, elements of humanity. They're elements of, like, created humanity. I mean, I just think about the oil, all the makeup that they go through to show the transformation of Alexia's body into not being one that's very human, one that's being putting out oil instead of blood. And, the car baby has the spine of metal at the end. But we see, like, when we get to the later stages of her pregnancy and her body's, like, ripping apart around the expanding belly, and underneath her skin is what looks like a sheet of metal. And so I think the bringing in of the idea of this woman not necessarily being a human, and that being the case in the eyes of all the men that are around her, except for Vincent the father, who sees her not as a human but as a son, and then eventually not as a son but as just someone who needs help and someone to love, and to who will accept the love that he has to give, even if there's no relation there at all.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean the whole relationship between Alexia and Vincent becomes one of affirmation. Affirmation that sort of transcends gender roles, gender norms. I would say, which is a largely this whole thing that this transhumanist thing that Timo was just talking about. I mean, from the this opening scene, of course, is Alexia as a child, and sort of points to this complicated relationship she has with her father, and then closes again with her hugging that car, feeling that way about it.
Yeah, the
And
like the
then
touch and this kind of this very clearly like intimate relationship between Alexia and vehicles
yeah,
specifically.
and then the following scene is
Like
one
Timo and
in
his
which
trains.
Exactly.
well, yes, the one in which we see a very explicit juxtaposition and also linkage between human bodies, specifically like sexualized female bodies, and cars. We're going through this sequence of all these men going around. This is a car show of some kind, but they are there for the models, to take selfies with them, to hit on them, etc., etc. And each one is sort of styled like the car that she is dancing on or dancing around. There is a linkage and also a juxtaposition there that I think is important. And
There
for Alexia, it is more importantly that, like, yeah, she has this job, she has this linkage, of course. But generally, I think there is a separation between not only her and gender, but her and humanity. I think those ideas, gender and humanity, are sort of interplayed. Humanity as opposed to like inhumanity, as opposed to like vehicles, metal, fire. These more elemental ideas that are at play in the film. She is sort of separated from humanity in that way. She has problems. She has issues.
I just think about
Creating bonds, creating relationships
the
like that.
doctors, at the beginning are like, oh, well, her hands she can move her hands, her motor functions seem to be okay, but watch out for any neurological problems that may develop. And I think, we cut out of that line and we cut to the title card, and then we cut to some neurological problems when she starts killing people, 5 minutes after the title card. Or I exaggerate. But there is something there too. I mean, the film, I think, is attempting to explain a lot with this opening sequence, and sets us up for investigating this humanist, not humanist angle later on. But it it is a little bit dropped, I think, in favor of this like father, the compare and contrast narrative that I was talking about earlier with the families when Vincent comes into the picture. Um,
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying about the movie feeling like it was two movies and that being sort of an issue to me, is that because it is so backgrounded, the like more body horror stuff that frankly I think is a little bit more artistically interesting. Um, that being backgrounded, I'm like, well, I kind of want to know more about that, and maybe that's just me and my interest in
that's just
horror or science fiction concepts and
your
stuff.
twisted mind,
But
bro.
yeah, but the movie is less concerned with that in the central section, which is an option, but it's certainly one that doesn't resonate as deeply with me. Because well, Abram, I think you're definitely right when you mentioned earlier that the stuff shown in the first section of the movie adds quite a bit of stakes and tension to that second part. I think that's absolutely why the movie ends up feeling as unpredictable as it is. Once you know that it's not going to be until much later in the narrative that things come to a head at all, that the body horror elements begin to return, or that the stakes will actually come to fruition. On the second watch, and I think that's the difference. On the second watch, I was much less concerned in that second. The stakes were much less apparent, or I didn't feel them as deeply because I knew that they weren't actually going to be. I wasn't actually going to see ramifications of that until much later on in the narrative. And of course, the movie still does have its sort of more interpersonal stakes, and Alexia's life as Adrian, and the dynamic with Vincent and the other firefighters. But again, I find that less interesting than I do the larger serial killer and body horror narratives. And so now that watching it again and knowing that this isn't actually going to show back up for quite a while, I was kind of just like put on autopilot, I guess, just like going through that section of the movie until things started getting a little bit more visually tense.
Yeah, I don't know. I just have so many thoughts. It's just hard to be me, I guess.
Okay.
I-
God, that is so true.
Because I was thinking about, and this is, I guess, somewhat stupid, but I think also apt in a way, so bear with me. There's a common question in like TikTok street man on the street style interviews. Where you ask a woman, would you rather be alone in the woods and encounter a man or a bear?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that this film
Do
is
this with a car. Same question, but
Yeah.
swap it out with the car.
yeah, there's, and this is where
Okay.
I find myself having trouble with the film because the sex that she has with the cars, we have no reason to believe it's non-consensual. We have she
At least
gets
the
in
first
the car.
time. At least the first time around. Yeah.
Oh, that car wants it.
And the car seems to want it too.
Yeah.
Because there's this
Yeah.
like, well, the
I think I think I know what you're getting at, Abram.
yeah. Continue.
But so what I wonder about then is what is her feeling towards the vehicle ultimately, and what is the nature of this relationship? Because to me, all I can take away from it really is this notion, again, if we're thinking of this film in some ways, this is kind of how I view it, as an exercise in showing different transgressive ideas. What if a woman was not impregnated by a man but by a car? What if the
That's
son
normal to a guy like me.
what if the son was actually a daughter and not related to you? And I want to talk about the trans reading of this narrative, but there's a lot of these sort of what ifs, right? But ultimately, what are we supposed to, or more specifically, how does Alexia feel about this relationship she has with the car and the child? What is ultimately the film trying to say about this?
Mhm.
Because if the sexual act with the car was mutually pleasurable, as I think the film suggests, what's the deal with the baby killing her then ultimately? What is this? What's the deal with this notion of the body being weak? This is an
Corrupted.
idea we
Yeah.
see constantly. We see it in Vincent in his steroid usage, and that's another thing I really want to talk about. But what ultimately is the point? What are we trying to
Yeah.
say with the car
I don't
fucking?
know. I think it's generally the body is weak is an interesting way to put it because I think it's an interesting thing to think about when we are exploring ideas of gender fluidity, that gender is often thought to be something that must be expressed physically through physical traits, and that perhaps things must be switched out or customized or whatever, or you must have certain coats of paint on yourself or anything like that. If we're trying to think about it in a
Certain
through the
parts in
lens
your
of,
engine, certain parts
Yeah.
under your hood.
and I'm not saying that is the case, but if we are looking at it as a metaphor through the human body and automobiles and vehicles, then like these are ideas that perhaps at play. I think it is a something that is not like a car or something inhuman is like the perfect ideal or something. I think it's maybe quite the opposite, in more that we are exploring something that is inhuman but can be customized and can be changed, and is such a departure from the normal human connections and gender norms that we are led to believe that must be stringently accorded to.
I would add that
She
Alexia does the same customization to herself in order to fit the needs of her circumstances. She breaks
Yeah.
her nose and she binds her chest and makes the baby bump go away to the best of her ability, and that's a form of customization. It's dangerous, and I think the film goes to great lengths to show how that is harmful to her and not like physically damaging to her body, but it's again similar idea of customization to fit what others expect of you.
I
Hmm.
So the reason I don't agree with Ducournau's notion here, I don't think it's aptly expressed in the narrative, is along the lines of things that Stephen and oh god, I want to Freudenberger.
Yes.
These are ideas expressed about there. I don't think that this film is so concerned with expressions of gender and very like gender essentialist illustrations of successful femininity, successful masculinity. I'll give you the two key examples. One key example is if you think about, and I'm only put a massive asterisk here. Don't put this out of context. I don't agree with it. If you think of the role of a woman as to give birth, right? She dies in childbirth at the end of the film. Or that's my implication as my reading.
I think so too.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's definitely what happens.
So she died in childbirth. And then we have this man, Vincent, who can't do the pull-up bar. And that might sound like a silly thing that I'm bringing into conversation here, but it was Stephen that raised it, and it's an important point. This like hallmarks of masculinity and femininity in a very like gender essentialist way are intrinsic to the failures of our characters. And
I hang on, I take a very different reading of that.
Sure.
I think that these are ideals that must be lived up to, big air quotes around that, where our characters are failing at, and it is killing them, or literally, or it is tearing them apart. I think what Ducournau is doing is asking us, or begging the question of why must we contain gender to a physical embodiment? You know, she is asking us to pose it as a larger, more ethereal question that transcends the human body, physical elements within our world. I think that is the question. That is the point of Titane, is that it is visceral, of course, but is gender visceral, or isn't it? Is it something greater, grander, that has to do with the people you love, or the life that you choose, etc., etc.? Why does it have to be transposed through physical means?
But I guess my question then to the film would be, why is it all physical in the narrative for the most part? I mean, this is where the trans reading comes in part. I mean, the notion of a trans serial killer transitioning or having some sort of genderqueer identity to hide their crimes is a harmful trope. So is the binding, you know, the chest binding as like a visual body horror image is not a particularly progressive idea. And so we're asking these questions about how does gender exist beyond aesthetic or socially conventional expressions of it, and yet the film is in this liminal space where our character of Alexia as Adrian is only concerned with physical expressions of gender. And to me, it feels very odd. It feels like if we're raising the question through a reinforcement of the idea we're trying to push against.
I don't think that Ducournau is reinforcing any of these ideas. I think it is a sort of punishing drama for our characters to go through these things. I don't think that she is like, see, look at these characters and what they are doing to try and affirm their gender identity in all these ways. I think that their journey, the things that befall our characters in this film are, a tragedy, more than anything else, in like the Greek sense, that they are forced to, or they believe they are forced to anyway, try and live out these ways, try and change themselves to escape the laws that they have broken, or the people they have failed in their lives.
Yeah, I think the problem that I have with the reading, that because they are in some way conforming to gender stereotypes, and that is their downfall, that means that the film is supporting those stereotypes as a positive thing, or just
that's not even really my reading, I guess.
Okay, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstand what you were saying.
No, I probably wasn't clear enough in it either. I think that I think ultimately my issue is
I also didn't read Steven's review, by the way, so I'm not sure.
That's fair, and I'm not
that.
even. This isn't. It's in part inspired by that, but my bigger
He has
issue
a
is
different, unique one-of-one take as we were.
no, it's a synthesis and we'll put all the stuff I'm talking about in the description. But by the end of the film, my issue is that we never see Vincent stop his steroid use. We see him adopt now, there is some interesting stuff, especially towards the end of the film with the dance on the fire truck that you talked about earlier, Tucker, or even Vincent as a sort of midwife figure delivering the car baby. And this is why, again, I certainly don't agree with Steven's very negative view of the film, and I don't agree with the very positive ones either, because I think that, to me, it comes back to it feeling like a jumble. What is the use in her dying at the end? What are we trying to say? That she shouldn't have gotten pregnant from the car? That the issue is that
that's something that would hurt you.
I don't think that
it's about
Ducournau's trying to lay these moralizing lessons for our characters into it. I don't think she's trying to say our characters should or should not have done these things.
I think it's so that Vince, well, it's not. I don't think it's for the purpose that Vincent holds this new child, but I think that the effect of having Vincent at the end of the film, like rediscovering this moment of like traditional fatherhood, of like holding a newborn child, one of that you are quote unquote related to, not really in this film's case, but yes, with the idea of the found family, like that he performs the stereotypically masculine role of then holding on to the baby and seems to accept it. He, as a character, seems to actually have quite a lot of love to give, and that he is not shy of handing it out to the people he thinks that need it in his life, even more than he like wants to give it. He's like, this, what am I gonna do? This person needs my help. What am I gonna do? I gotta deliver this child right now. That kind of ending note to me is like a transfer. We go from this like unloving household, Alexia doesn't talk to her, like they don't converse with her real father. I mean, she kills her parents. And so then when it's time for her to die, the thing that she leaves behind ends up going back to this new parental figure, this new like grandchild, so to speak, is then handed over to the grandfather of this new formed and both hybrid family, hybrid gender, hybrid human family.
And again, I like Vincent's side of the plot a lot better. I think it's a lot more interesting. But in that reading, Timo, this is where I take issue with the gendered, aspects of the narrative, because in that reading, the role of Alexia was to give birth to and give this moment to Vincent, right? So is that not reaffirming this feminine, this idea as the feminine character in the narrative to give birth to this child that completes the arc of the male character? To me, that feels very odd.
Yeah, because I agree with you. It does feel odd. I do feel like I'm missing a little part of it, that there is a puzzle piece that explains it, but that my conceptualization of like real high level gender representation in our society and these crazy radical ideas of gender expression being a socialized and created an entirely created construct that we all subconsciously and consciously like fall into line, and we just go along with it because it's imposed upon us by society, and that the people who choose to break out of that are often viewed as very deviant, and different societies take different punishing looks at them. But that my actual personal understanding and ability to like grok all that and fit it into just my own understanding outside of film reviewing, just my own understanding of how it functions, or how these like theoretical and philosophical ideas even function at a base level, is like, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around it. And so then to go the step further and be like, and now apply it to a film that's got a lot more going on and makes me want to look away half the time because I'm freaked out by it, like that adds another level of difficulty.
Let me lay this on you guys here. Let me
he's got an idea.
Let me lay a fat one on you here.
Oh.
I've already sort of talked about how Ducournau is begging the question or asking us to think about gender as an ethereal idea that transcends the physical form. In that way, I think it's fair to say that the film can display biology, physical manifestation as a prison of sorts. And I think that is exactly perhaps what is going on with Alexia and her pregnancy. She tries on numerous
She does
occasions
try
to
to
hide her pregnancy, to
end
give
it.
herself an abortion.
Ugh.
She tries to get rid of this thing, but she can't. It is a weight. It is a expectation. It is a responsibility that is thrust upon her by the nature of the body that she was given, a body that she resents and tries to change throughout the film, tries to hide and morph in certain ways, which is the thing that we've all talked about. But what is most important here, Abram, to I think your question about the child becoming a completion for Vincent's arc is this. I think what Ducournau is saying is that what kills one person, manifestations of gender that can kill one person, feel like a prison to one person, can feel in turn freeing or affirming to another. I think that is the whole point of gender affirmation, between men and women. And if you fall somewhere in that spectrum, or if you don't, then that like there's it's gender envy at a certain point, but through a lens of a body horror film where a birthed child is half human, half metal, some sort of amalgamation of those things. But no, I think it is exactly that. It is something that is a prison for Alexia that ends up being something that is freeing or affirming for Vincent, something that he is pursuing, a masculine ideal that he is pursuing through steroids, through trying to maintain his young, physical, masculine form. But in fact, what is affirming to him is being a father.
Yeah. Or
Mhm.
being a caregiver of sorts. And as we
Mhm.
mentioned, like the last major actions that he takes are him subverting the traditional roles of masculinity. And I do think that's definitely a very interesting read. It certainly is not one I would have thought of if you hadn't brought that up. I think it's really interesting.
It makes me
Yeah, I
like
mean,
Vincent's character quite a lot because of
I
this.
mean, I love Vincent.
Like,
He's
just
he's the best performance in the film too.
Yeah,
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 I agree.
totally.
yeah,
Y-
he's so
Yeah,
lovely.
and like I think I don't know. I like because Tanner, I think that these ideas we have are they're in opposition, but I think that that's not maybe it's a fault of the filmmaking.
Sure.
Because even if you think, because I'm still trying to think about the question of the relationship between Alexia and the Cadillac, right? Because when she wakes up the next morning,
Mm.
she's got bruises on her. She doesn't know where they're from,
Yes.
and
It is coded as a sort of sexual assault in a way,
yes,
for
yeah,
sure.
certainly. And so that's why I think that's also just why I'm somewhat confused by and again, this is where I come back to it's not that I think that Titane is an awful film or that there
Sure.
isn't a lot of interesting ideas, progressive ideas about the presentation of gender, and you might have to walk through some uncomfortable um, text and subtext ideas to get to where you're getting to. And because
Mhm.
in some ways then there's a implicit criticism in the point, right? Who's been sacrificed to get Vincent this feeling of fulfillment as a father?
Yeah.
It's the female character, right? Who
Mhm.
is in to again the relationship with the car is just so enigmatic that I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like it's coded
It
as
comes
both a good
back.
and
It
bad
comes
thing.
back around though. I think that's an interesting
Yeah.
thing that we haven't discussed is that the fire trucks are very ubiquitous in this ending part of the film, and I think Ducournau's cinematography or the direction of the cinematography is clear to show us and to stage us in the garage, surrounded by the vehicles. They look, they watch, they have humanoid features ish with the way that the fronts of them are laid out, and then that Alexia goes back and has another sexual encounter with one of the fire trucks, and
Mhm.
so that I think it doesn't help us solve much because it further complicates it. It further brings in it bringing back the like desire for the machine. uh, well, I don't it doesn't answer if it was consensual, if this is a thing that Alexia seeks out, or that just is like a spur of the moment kind of impulse thing, I think it's unclear in my mind, at least.
I mean, just to take it as a filmmaking thing, to even try to step away from the tangle, right? I think part of why the beginning of the film is so effective is a writing choice, which is to have everything really from her first kill through to that scene with the Cadillac feel as though it's not that foreign to her. And I think that that's an interesting choice.
She's very comfortable with the murder. Actually, like she has a and also of course we learned that it's literally not her first time killing. I don't know if there's necessarily an implication if it's her first time fucking a car or not. But you know, it doesn't really. I don't know if it really matters. But what I think is interesting about all of this stuff is we've talked about the gender elements, the transhuman elements of all of this. But another big element of this movie that I am quite confused by, and I'm curious to discuss the maybe thematic implications of how it impacts the gender elements, the transhuman elements of the movie, is that she's a serial killer. She is a psychopath. She has very little regard for human life other than her own. Even people who are kind to her, it isn't until Vincent that she connects with someone on a level where she cares enough about them to not abandon them or kill them, which is what happens with every other character in her life that we see up to that point. Even her parents, who she's been living with for, I don't know how old, but like mid-20s, late 20s, whatever. I find it really interesting that there is also this psychopathic serial killer element to the character that I think adds a lot of muddiness, frankly, to these things about seeing her as the protagonist of the film and as someone I feel on a structural level I'm supposed to try to relate to on some level. But the way that she is also an inhuman person. She doesn't share the same traits of everyone else because she has some sort of mental condition that prevents her from relating to people, whether that is from before the accident or after. I'm not really sure. She's very annoying at the beginning. That doesn't necessarily mean that she's been a psychopath her whole life. But
once annoying, always annoying.
Disagree. Yeah, all annoying children do grow up to be serial killers 100% of the time.
But I find it interesting because it's something I levied as a criticism at the beginning of this review, is that I am fascinated by the character, but she is so cold and distant that I think it creates a hard time for me to sort of connect to the themes and world of the film and the struggle of Alexia, because I don't think that she cares about anyone other than herself. And that's a very like empathetic human emotion sort of thing. I'm very much someone who connects to characters based on their variety of traits and their struggles and their desires. And she is so enigmatic, not only from a screenplay perspective, but also just from like what is her deal? She's someone who's a psychopath, and I have a hard time connecting to that, believe it or not. And
I wouldn't think you'd have a hard time with that. Just knowing you.
Yeah, knowing you, Tucker, I don't know.
But what do you guys think about the serial killer aspect? The fact that she is someone that, you know, the law should be after. That is something I will very much defend.
Coming down hard on Tucker. You're coming down against murder in this
time.
Tough
this time,
on crime, Tucker.
You know, it depends on the day. It depends on the day.
See. Yeah.
But then the fact that she has a character arc where she learns to connect to other people, or one other person at least, and then she dies and leaves behind this baby that is also in some way a manifestation of herself, because this baby, much like her, is also part metal and has this inhuman element to her. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it just raised a lot of questions that then add so much stickiness to the other themes where I'm like, I don't know what the movie's trying to say. Is like the trans experience and gender abolition and all this stuff, but she's also a serial killer, and I don't want to relate to her.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it.
Like we got this almost in the whole review without talking about the fact she's a serial killer, or at least on a thematic level.
I think that, I mean, do we believe that the TV reports are about her?
Doesn't matter. We see her kill 6 people.
I agree. I do agree. We see her kill all those other people, but I think that
all right, 6 people or 9 people? Where's your bar, Timo? Where's the line drawn in the sand for you?
Once you hit half a dozen, that's the ceiling.
It's not if she is or if she isn't the one that they're talking about on the news. It is irrelevant because the consequences of that force her into acting in certain ways, changing her appearance, assuming the identity. it's like a plot level thing almost. It's almost like we are supposed to ignore that about her character because it does you it makes me it makes it a lot harder for me to square all these other aspects of the character that we've been talking about because you like as you say we aren't really supposed to like her. I think that we do see justification for like the early kill, like the first one with the guy who's like pestering
Sure.
her. I think this one is
Though put in conversation with the fact that she then senselessly kills like 5 people at a party, it feels to me like no matter what this guy did, she probably would have killed him.
yeah. So I don't know. The change, I think that it just sets us up for a kind of a killer to not a killer arc. She stops killing
Sure.
after she gets with is enveloped with Vincent's life and living at the firehouse. So there's an arc, but yeah, other than that, I'm like, ugh, I don't know where to fit that whole puzzle piece in. And the rest of it's making me feel like I'm even more confused now
Yeah.
than I was at the beginning of the review.
Sorry.
Here's what I have to
Thoughts
say.
on serial killing?
Okay, go, Abram.
I think it's cool.
Two big thumbs up from Abram.
Because so she doesn't stop killing because she
Pro
has
murder?
she doesn't have no, don't clip me out of context here either. I gotta do it twice. I don't like murder. I think murder's icky.
Oh, brother.
Okay.
I like that she doesn't stop for any sort of moral reason. She stops because one of her would-be victims got away, and so her identity was out there. Her picture was out there. I'm gonna read a quote. Don't kill me. This is from Ducournau as well.
What? Why would we?
I don't know. I
We're
just
not
didn't know if that
murderers.
would make you want to
You
kill
just
me
like
somehow. From the get-go, I
I don't murder
absolutely
so much. It's on my mind. I won't lie.
from the get-go, I absolutely did not want to justify my character's violence. I did not want to pathologize the fact that she's a psychopath. When women kill in movies, it is very often linked to a cause that is explained. There's a justification. Men can be inherently violent for no reason, but for women, that is utterly unacceptable.
Mhm.
And I think that that's kind of a cool idea.
Very progressive.
Yeah. Yeah, but
I mean, it is, but
Yeah.
it comes. I mean, it comes back to how I'm just sort of. I don't know how I feel about Titane because like that's a cool idea, but I think that that's a sort of idea that maybe plays out better in a movie where she is a serial killer for the whole of the movie. I think that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely.
To me, ultimately, like that's a commentary on like her psyche that we don't. Well, we literally get into her psyche when they put a fucking plate in her head. But I just think I think that it's ultimately unessential why she kills, and I think that it's just sort of there with a film that has this many ideas, right? Having a premise of like a serial killer who's on the lam is just kind of neat, and I think it's okay for some stuff. I don't want to be the curtains are just blue kind of guy because he should get killed with the ear pick thing. But I just think that makes for a intrinsically interesting premise.
Sure.
Yeah,
and again,
it's just good screenwriting.
Yeah, I
that's
think
what I
it
was saying
heightens
about the
attention
plot.
for the rest of the movie.
It
Well,
works
I
extremely
don't-
well on a plot level.
I wouldn't disagree with that if we were reviewing a Blumhouse movie.
Sure.
If this was something that Tanner and I were just going into as a double feature on a Thursday night. But I do think that a film that is as textually and thematically rich as this, with as many things as it seems that Ducournau is trying to say with the actions of her character, I think the explanation being because violence and murders aren't explained for male characters in other movies means that it's justifiable for this instance of a character that is a murderer to not be explained, I think is very, very shaky ground, in my opinion, because I also, and maybe this is just me being closed-minded at the moment, but I can't think of many examples where hyper-violence, especially in this way of like murder, is not justified for a male character who's the protagonist. It's quite often that a psychopathic killer character is the antagonist, and the idea is you don't need to justify them because they're the bad force.
I think that's her point, though, is that like men. She's not saying men who are protagonists can kill without reason. She's just saying men in movies can kill without reason, which is I don't know, point to any slasher movie.
Yeah, but I think there's a marked difference in that the character we are following in this movie, that is the one that we do see have an arc, is is the killer, which is very different from Friday the 13th Part 3.
Well, fair. But you know,
this is a slightly better movie.
This is slightly Part 3 is that Jason is still the killer?
Yeah. What? I mean, Jason's only not the killer in the first one.
Sorry, well, because my point again was going to be, Tucker, that in, you know, if we flip it again, where, you know, a woman is the antagonist of a slasher movie, of a horror movie, then it is A, that almost never happens. B, when
except for Friday the 13th.
But Tucker, she has a reason.
That's a good. It's not a very good reason.
Or let me even put it to you this way.
There's a reason.
Think about that. Well, actually, I don't want to think about it because it's stupid. I didn't see it. The one where he puts the bear trap through the woman's chest, and he's wearing like a beekeeper's mask.
In A Violent Nature.
Yeah. Imagine Halloween, because I've actually seen Halloween, right?
There you go.
I think
about Halloween.
Part of the fun of in that one is it Jason, right?
Michael.
Is it Michael?
Michael Myers.
I don't watch many of these types of films. but part of what's cool about the killer is that there is, well, this isn't even a good example because he's got a backstory. He was in some kind of ward, and I've read the Wikipedia summaries for the forthcoming ones.
He was in some kind of ward. He was.
Yeah, for killing.
Let me simplify the point here. It can be cool and it can be visceral, right? If part of the horror of a serial killer and why maybe a case like the Zodiac killer would be so grabbing to people is that
make a good movie.
It would make a good movie. Someone should do that.
I got good news, you guys.
Oh boy.
Is that you don't understand that person. I think a lot of the fixation with true crime is what happened, what made this person snap and do these killings, right? And I think that there's something of a scary and eerie proposition, which to me is why the first part of the film is effective, that you get in that headspace and you can't intuit what's going on. I think that it also just speaks to the film's ability to establish a mood very well. I think it's an extremely tense and unpredictable first 45 minutes of the film, and I just think that works on the level of a thriller. And then there's I mean, do we think that because then there's the other thing is like, do you think that the accident did it? And then we're like, I don't know, but you can maybe try to.
Well, she was annoying, so
right, she was annoying.
For the accident,
open book, shut book. But I don't know. I just think that it works to unsettle the viewer. I think it's an effective tool to pull the characterization lever into the off position. What if you didn't know this person? You only knew their actions. Again.
And then when she's silent later on, we reinforce that idea by not allowing her to speak, you know, via plot logistics, but still the result is the same.
I think it's an interesting experiment. And again, this is why, again, as I said a billion times, I'm mixed on the film because I think that it's an interesting and viscerally effective stylistic choice, but I don't think it's a texturally rich one. How about?
Sure. Like I said, I think it is A, just good screenwriting. I think it is B, something that adds a lot of tension to the back half of the film. If even as some of us have criticisms about like the second, third act or whatever isn't as interesting if we don't have body horror elements because our character is quiet or more reserved, etc., etc. There is then an inherent tension of will she be found out, and also will they find out that she is a serial killer? I mean, there's like the moment where she tries to run out of the car right when Vincent is taking her to like this depot or whatever. You could kind of read that as like she hears this like scanner radio. She's like, "Oh fuck, this guy's a cop." Like there's no other explanation for why he would have this in his car. Like, has he figured me out? Is he taking me to a police station? Like, I just can't. It's not safe for me to be around the police at this point. But that tension runs throughout. And we moved past it a bit ago, but like it would, somebody said that like it would have been a better plot point in a movie where like she just is a serial killer the whole time. I respectfully disagree. Having your main character be a serial killer having your protagonist be a serial killer in a movie without any reasoning is how you get something mid like In a Violent Nature.
Wait, but isn't the point that we're making here is that there isn't a reasoning for her to be a serial killer?
No, yeah, exactly. That's my point, is that the movie would be less interesting if it was only about that. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, yeah,
I think
because you're right, it would
yeah.
feel more traditional. I certainly agree with that. But I think to Abrams' the point that Abrams was making isn't that her being a serial killer the whole time wouldn't make it feel more like other things, but to the point that Ducournau is making of drawing parallels to male killers who don't have an explanation, that her point would have been better served in a movie that she was a serial killer the whole time.
I understand that, but I also, barring an execution of a film like that, I would say that ideal of a film doesn't sound that interesting to me.
Sure.
Of a character, a killer main character who has no reason for it. I was like, well, then what's the movie? I guess it's in a violent nature. Again, mid.
Yeah.
Though he technically does have a reason because they steal his amulet or whatever. I think
his amulet.
I really like this scene.
Amber lamps.
What if I took Abrams' watch? You think the same thing would happen?
Yeah, I think so. I think he put a bear trap through your chest and then grab it by your head and then spin it all the way through your stomach.
I gotta watch that movie. That sounds sick.
I just
you're
wait a
talk
couple
about
weeks
favorite
on
scene?
Twitter. The clip's always on Twitter.
That movie came out like a year ago.
Yeah,
It
makes the rounds.
Just wait a
It makes
few
the
It
rounds.
circulates.
Yeah.
I really like the scene when all of the firemen are dancing in that club type vibe.
I love it. I love it too.
I think that, and we get this. Again, this is really interesting. This is why I think the film is kind of cool sometimes. This father-son, father-daughter dance moment.
Mm-hmm.
Classic daddy-daughter dancing.
No weighted, expectations or deceit around it at all.
And I think that the filmmaking in these moments is just really beautiful. I think that the score is used very well. I think color is used very well. I think that there is just there are these moments that just feel like such a stylistic catharsis, just a release of emotion.
Sure.
And this jubilation as we're dancing and we're smoking. And again, there's a point here we're performing a certain type of relationship, a certain way. We're big, sexy, masculine firefighters, right? We have to perform.
Yeah,
that.
we are, Abram.
We should. Yeah, we're actually working on a sexy fireman calendar for people that you can purchase.
We've been saying this for years.
More Patreon stuff alongside Timo's moaning compilation.
Not what I was going to title it. Not what I was going to title it, but yes.
Hey, that did be great viewership.
I just think that there are these scenes that just illustrate a real wistful command of her craft that are just excellent.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is.
The movie is definitely stylistically energetic and very brash, and these moments of score and color and cinematography and light, I think, are really quite striking. And that on a filmmaking level is certainly the thing that I took away most from this movie. I remember the things that I remembered about it before rewatching it is that it had this sort of almost rave-like energy. And of course, that's more specifically to a couple of scenes that are actually raves or parties. But that sort of energy definitely radiates out of the film. And when you see the strong primary color poster and frankly, whenever you think about this movie, it's the loud music and people with scars and cars and all this kind of stuff. And it's those couple of sequences that really do make an impact on me, which I think is interesting that, again, that style is very strong in a couple of sequences, but I don't think is necessarily pervasive throughout the course of the film, which isn't necessarily a critique. I know that those scenes are supposed to stand out from the others, but that they're definitely standout moments in my mind in terms of what the artistic craft of Ducournau is being able to really nail this sort of rave party energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the dark, sleek, kind of oily cinematography is going hand in hand with this
oily cinematography.
I would call it oily. I mean, a lot of the film takes place at night. I think we've got a lot of these spectral highlights, shiny little liquidy looking things popping up on the frame. A scene that I'm thinking about is the one where the firefighters go off, and it is the younger one that kind of has been taunting Adrian. He dies.
Rayan, or I think.
Vincent kills him.
Yeah, Vincent kills him in this scene.
In a very funny way, I might add. He's like, here, hold this propane tank and run it into that fire.
Crazy. But hey, he's the captain. You follow what the captain says.
You gotta do what he says.
They make a big deal on that.
He's their god, as he says,
One interesting thing about Vincent's character and I wonder if you guys picked up on this, or maybe it's just super obvious, and I feel like I'm being clever. But I think that it's pretty heavily implied from the first like firefighter rescue sequence or like training sequence because Vincent sees a burning child's body in a cabinet. It's not actually there.
He knows.
His son died, and he pretended that his son was not dead, and like put out all this stuff of like, my son's been missing, and keeping up pretenses and this delusion for all of these years. But internally, he's known the entire time that his son is dead. Okay, that's pretty clear to everyone. You guys picked on that too?
He knows, and when his ex-wife shows up, she basically reaffirms this, and then it is a slow trickle throughout the film, but by the end of it, he's also like, it doesn't matter who you are, like, you're my son. And his ex-wife is like, she's just like, he needs this. Like, on a certain level, she knows as well. He's like, just don't hurt him. Like, he needs this. Take care of him, etc., etc. I think it's specifically what she says.
A sad and tender note from the ex-wife there.
Yeah,
I mean, it's heartbreaking, honestly.
Yeah. I do want to talk about Vincent, but I guess more broadly, I'll start here where Abram started off this conversation with the, these dance sequences. I think it's a really cool thing what Ducournau does here in her display of masculinity. If we are sort of, laying out certain, binary gender ideals here and then deconstructing them, the way she displays masculinity is so interesting and not at all like cliche or whatever. How she does it is these very euphoric, earnest, beautiful, slow motion dance sequences where it's just all these guys, these burly firefighters, just like dancing around, having fun with each other, not really performing masculinity in the ways that we would typically think about them. They do that at certain points in the film, of course, but the points where we really slow down and just kind of soak it in, where Alexia is also just kind of in awe of these moments, are really quite beautiful. And she mirrors this and perhaps undermines it a little bit with this sequence between when Vincent tries to dance with Adrian, or who we think Adrian Alexia. And it's to the song, the song is She's Not There, which is, sort of a clever little needle drop there if you're listening to the lyrics of the song. But like, it's like him trying to dance with her, and then they start fighting a little bit. It is weaving between this like masculine euphoria versus masculine performativeness.
Yeah,
that's
it's
just
very
really
smart.
good.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Ducournau does know what she's doing. I think even though we're a little confused, I don't think that she was confused at all in the construction, writing, production, development of this movie.
Yeah. Love Vincent. Like I said, Vincent Lindon is probably the best performance in the movie. All the stuff with him taking the steroids and stumbling over himself and failing, these feats of strength or whatever, but also being very assured, a veteran firefighter in this way, being very commanding of his men. It's another thing of him balancing exactly what Ducournau is going here, being the key masculine figure of the movie, weaving between masculine performance and then like actual, real, open-hearted tenderness. He's incredible. Love him.
Said it perfectly.
Yeah. I think the reason why I like this film as much as I do, even though, as I've mentioned multiple times, I do think that the interpersonal character dynamic is the part at face value I should be less invested in. But I think because Vincent is such a instantly compelling character as this father with so much heart and this leader with so much heart, and the way that he struggles to balance the his desire to be a very loving father with the fact that he does also need to be a very commanding presence to his other firefighter team members, I think is a really interesting character interplay, and he is where all the energy for me comes in that second part of the movie. And the way that and I guess also to Abram's point about Alexia's death sort of fulfilling his character arc, that's very much how I feel about that second half of the movie, not necessarily in a critical way, but in that it's all the interactions that the two of them have. I feel much more like this is interesting for him, healthy for him. I'm invested in the way that having Alexia, or who he thinks is Adrian, who's his son, a child back in the home. I'm mostly fascinated by the way that is impacting his mental health and his emotional responses, and the ways in which he's very he's like has this really push and pull dynamic in the way that he's parenting, and then he'll like be like super caring and like very kissing a bunch, and but then he'll also like snap in a couple of small moments. And so like you can see this sort of frustration and tenderness like bubbling and like changing throughout the whole film.
And I mean the fact that Alexia is so silent for that second half of the film really lends us to being within Vincent's head. I mean, we see a lot of how Alexia is reacting, but I think just by virtue of communication and talking, we become more interested in Vincent's position within this situation because he is the one who is verbalizing what's going on, whereas we see a lot on Alexia's face, and Agatha Roussel's performance does a lot here to communicate what's going on inside her head. But like you said, Vincent, I think, becomes the star of the show when he is the main player of the show, because we're hearing him and seeing him.
Roussel definitely has to be, this steely, quiet, intense performance, like just very intense, very, almost entirely wordlessly. And she does excel at that. Like she is incredible. Like at that, when you just cut to a reaction shot of her, or her trying to hold her own in these sequences without saying anything, like there is like something drawing you into the face that she is, and she also has this very striking look where she has shaved her eyebrows and the eyes are sunken and everything like that, and the nose is of course still swollen and everything. Like there's her look is just so enthralling and intense and dark and stewing, and so yeah. But no, you obviously,
especially when she's got the like metal thing over her nose and the half shaved head. I'm like, this is an insane character look. Just like every element of that character design is so distinct.
Yeah.
Well, should we give it a score? Anybody else?
Well,
you got anything to say here in our?
Yeah, I got one other thing to say. I have this.
Toss it into the ring.
Right, this guy.
I don't know. I don't know anything about religion, but because he refers to himself as God and to Adrian as Jesus. So I was just like thinking, like, is there like a religious reading of the film in some way? Is there like some world where like getting pregnant by the car is some messy kind of immaculate conception type of idea?
I see. Interesting.
Shit. Could be. Could be.
Some immaculate conception of sorts.
Yeah.
There's like a good engine pun there with like
half car Jesus is here to save the day.
Yeah,
is here to forgive us of our sins.
Yeah, because like I don't know.
Yeah, and then Vincent would be Joseph because he's not actually the father of the child.
Yeah,
maybe
because it's
we're also mixing. We're also mixing on metaphors because is Alexia Jesus or is she Mary?
Well, it'd be recontextualizing God and Jesus as Mary and Joseph.
I see. What? We're taking the actual deity. We're taking the deity out of the equation initially.
Yeah, because he could just prescribe that they're God and Jesus, but then you can read them.
The car is God.
No, but who gets Mary pregnant? Wait. This is why I don't know anything. Who gets Mary pregnant? Is it the sheep?
Yeah, it is not the sheep.
That would really change the story.
I think
it was the car.
Is it? Well, no. I think
in the Bible.
In the Bible.
In the Bible,
yes, it was the Cadillac. It was the Cadillac in the Bible.
And on the eighth day, God
for a very long time.
Cadillac.
Yeah.
For a very long time, people were very confused by what is this? Yeah, what is a car?
The three wise men came over, and one of them was driving a Cadillac.
It was a lowrider with activated suspension.
One of them brought the myrrh, and one of them brought the wheat or whatever. One of them brought the Cadillac. Much better gift.
No, frankincense.
Yeah, I would rather get a Cadillac than myrrh.
So I don't know. Somebody who knows more about religion.
What if you're a 0th century poor woman?
I'll still take
0th century.
I think if you had a Cadillac, you would essentially be God. But then you wouldn't.
I think you would be.
But then you'd have to mine your own fossil fuels.
Catch me
Sure, the
gifting.
dinosaurs weren't around
You can
yet
use it
for you
one
to get
time.
to the fuel
Yeah,
from them.
yeah. Catch me gifting my Cadillac
The
to
dinosaurs
Mansa
weren't
Musa.
around yet. Great point. Holy shit, we're going off the rails, boys.
Maybe the Cadillac runs on the
I'm
first
waiting on
sense.
Tanner's score. We need to hear the
Oh,
palm
sorry,
details, and then
sorry,
we get Tanner's score,
sorry.
and then we can move on from this godforsaken
okay.
bit.
Oh, you do palm details first, right?
Yes, yes, that happens.
You know, I forget because last time was 79 was a year we already did. So in the year 2021, obviously Titane was the Palme d'Or winner. I don't think that. I wonder what the last time they split was. I'll look that up in a second here. But no, because we haven't had a split in a while. So it was the only film of the 24 in competition to win the top prize. The jury president this year, I love doing these modern ones because we actually recognize
know who
the
they
names
are.
in films here. The jury president this year was none other than Spike Lee. Spike Lee was the jury
Oh yeah, I remember
president this
that.
year.
Yeah.
Mhm. He was pretty
Um,
pumped about this one, right?
Yeah. There's an interesting theory, and I'd like to think about this, you know, as we continue to go through these. It's easier for modern ones. But this is from the Blank Check podcast, where one of the hosts has a theory that the jury president, oftentimes, if it's a filmmaker, will give the Palme d'Or to, and of course it's a jury as well, but will give the Palme d'Or to a film that they think they can't make, or is like the farthest thing from the thing that they make.
That's an interesting thought. Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see Spike
Like
Lee
the
making a
thing
movie
that is
like
most
this.
impressive to them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
We'll
other
stew
people
on
on
that.
the jury this year that voted for Titane included Mati Diop, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Melanie Loren, and Song Kang-ho. Friend of the show, Song Kang-ho.
Yes, friend indeed.
Other films in competition include Leos Carax's Annette, Paul Verhoeven's Benedetta, shout out a film that we had reviewed on this show on Quest, Hamaguchi's Drive My Car,
Banger.
Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch was in competition, Ashghar Farhadi's A Hero was in competition, Apichatpong Receptacle's Memoria, Sean Baker's
goddamn it.
Red Rocket, and Joaquin Trier's The Worst Person in the World.
Tucker, you
Friend of the show, Sean Baker.
you really
That's
like
Sean Baker.
Memoria, right?
I really
Oh my
like
God.
Memoria.
I like The Worst Person in the World. That was a good one too.
Yeah, The Worst Person
Well,
in the
I like
World, great
Parasite.
movie. Red Rocket.
Not a competition.
Red Rocket, great film. What was
Drive
it?
My Car,
Also,
really
yeah,
good.
Drive My Car, excellent movie.
Drive My Car, incredible. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, let's see where this one goes on the list. Titane. You ready? 3, 2, 1,
Yes.
go. Punch, boom.
Punch, bang, boom.
Punch,
Abram.
Punch, bang. Oh, he's thinking. He's deliberating still. Oh, there
Oh
it
wait,
is.
There
no.
he goes.
Oh, I thought I clicked it.
Oh, no, he
He
didn't.
did. He
Circle.
clicked it. We have a
Did you
score.
Do it right?
Yeah, he did it right. We've got
Okay, I just want to.
Titane at a 7.4. So we're going to have
Wow.
to debate a little bit here.
Mhm.
7.4 leads us to a tie with the film La Dolce Vita. So think on this while I give you the point breakdown. Abram gave it a 6.5. I gave it a 6.9. Tucker gave it a 7.2. And Tanner gave it an 8.8. So that makes a 7.4. Tied with La Dolce Vita. Who wants to wager an opinion? Should Titane go above or below La Dolce Vita? It's the only one to tie, so we've only got to just think this through here.
It's a tough call. It is a tough call ultimately. You know, you have something, you have something that can only be made basically in the modern day and age versus like, one of the most well-respected Italian films of all time. Not even Italian, one of the most respected films of all time.
Yeah. Don't remember Dick Diddles from that movie.
Tucker, don't you remember how the life was so sweet?
Not really.
Was this the one
I mean,
with
as
Don Chicho?
What? Isn't that a joke that we made about The Godfather like 4 years ago, Timo?
No, where's the one with yeah,
What are you talking about?
Don Chicho?
I don't
What's that?
think this is this movie.
Yeah, he's in The Godfather.
Yeah.
What the hell? Where was the one? Never mind. There was one
Anti-Italian
movie.
discrimination.
Yeah, it really is.
If not obvious by the fact that I said I don't remember Dick Diddles about La Dolce Vita, which isn't a necessarily criticize the film, be like, it didn't really impact me. I think Titane is a much more interesting film. And I also think that my thoughts on the film in terms of its unique texture and artistic value definitely raised quite a bit while going through all of this. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I was having a hard time thinking about the movie from like a thematic lens. And then we just covered like 7 topics super in depth, and Timo gave like a small sociology class lesson. And so I honestly think this sparked some of the most interesting discussion that we've had on this show. And frankly, again, I don't remember too much about La Dolce Vita. And so I would easily put Titane above.
I'm gonna agree just by the virtue of how much hooting and hollering I was doing during Titane. It's a mark of good filmmaking to make somebody like squelch and yelp and holler that much. So it'll get my vote too.
Yeah.
Tanner, you agree?
Tanner's fucking waiting. He's gonna he wants to try to litigate here. I don't know. I don't know. I think I certainly have a higher opinion of La Dolce Vita, but I was more intrigued by this film. I don't know. Tanner, what are you gonna do? Do I have to decide, really?
Oh, I mean, I did give Titane a higher score.
By 0.3.
By 0.3, I do think these are both great films. Yeah, well, Abram, you fall, and I mean, I don't really want to tie, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'd probably.
Can we just go over that?
Yeah,
I don't know. What do you think?
I would put La Dolce Vita above.
Okay.
You would put La Dolce Vita
But keep in mind, I also have the biggest point differential here between the two.
That's true.
1.5 is a lot.
1.5 is a
lot. Do I want to? You know what? I guess just
you and I are sitting pretty here, confident in our takes.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of there not being a tie, and you know, it's only a 1 spot difference, and they're tied basically at the same score. I will say Titane because I did give it a higher score.
Okay, so we came to a conclusion. La Dolce Vita is going to go below Titane, or rather, Titane gets to go above La Dolce Vita. So at spot number 20, we have a placement for Julie Ducournau's film Titane, 20th spot on our list of all the Palme d'Ors. There we have it.
There you have it.
Cheating.
Alrighty, and now I believe we are going to spoon. We're going to spoon the wheel because Tanner has alternate plans for us.
I do have alternate plans. I have some theater-going plans that align up with a Palme d'Or winning film. Let me you know, I can still sort of like spin this out a little bit.
Okay.
If you'll just allow me. This is a filmmaker who this is the last film of theirs that I have to see. Wait, what the fuck am I looking up?
Here's what I think you should do. I think you should put your address in the video, and then people can look for the theaters around your address. Figure out what you might.
I see.
Yeah.
I've seen all the films from this filmmaker. I was talking and I couldn't remember the name of the movie for some reason. But I got it now. So this is a film from the year 1990. It's a film that stars, some folks like Isabella Rossellini, Harry Dean Stanton, Crispin Glover, Willem Dafoe, and of course, most notably, Laura Dern and Nicolas Cage from David Lynch. This is Wild at Heart.
Oh. Wild at Heart. Well, our little tribute to the late, great David Lynch.
Yes. Local theater around here is doing some David Lynch retrospective, and I'm going to see it. The last David Lynch film I have not seen in theaters.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one. I've seen a couple other Lynches, but this should be pretty fun.
Yeah. I've only ever seen Blue Velvet.
Okay. None of us have seen Wild at Heart, correct?
Nope.
I have.
Oh, you've seen it?
Yeah.
I've seen the jumping on the bed.
I saw like 8 years ago and I didn't like it. So,
okay.
I've seen the.
But who knows?
The like jumping on the bed, like cross dissolve a million times on Twitter.
Oh, sure.
And maybe we'll watch a movie. And I almost watched it a couple weeks ago. I didn't know it won the Palme d'Or. So
yes.
Good thing I decided to watch a Lego Star Wars YouTube video instead. Or I would have had to watch this twice, huh?
Yeah.
Great cinema regardless.
Well, thank you guys for talking about Titane. We're going to be back next time to do Wild at Heart from David Lynch. Until then, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, write some comments, put some anecdotes down in that box if you so desire. We always read them, and we appreciate them too. So that's all from me. You know what I say. Stay cool. Keep warm. Peace.
I know I wouldn't want to edge with that stuff.
How about this one? This is a higher grit.
What's your plan? What are you doing with that shit?
Sanding.
Getting in the carpentry.
No, I'm repairing. So you remember when the Nazis like spruced up the concentration camp before the Red Cross came through?
Famously, I was there.
Well, my landlord is coming to do a walkthrough next week, so I have to fix the drywall.
Oh, I see. The drywall. Where do you guys got exposed drywall like down in the basement?
Holy
or
shit!
something?